Hello, everybody. Welcome to another video over here on That's Comical. I am Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome. And if you're watching it, it happens to be a Wednesday. Happy New Comic Book Day. Well, I am very excited because it is a new year. And more importantly, it's a very iconic year for a very well-known superhero. And that is why we are here for another episode of Character Profiles. So before we actually talk about our topic today, I just want to introduce the people who are here. My fellow That's Comical colleagues, Cammie and Andy, are here. Guys, it's great to be here because you know how much we love having great conversations.
Good to be here, talking about my favorite superhero.
Always excited.
And we are very fortunate to have a guest on the show with us today. She actually happens to be a very big supporter of the channel, and we thank her very much for that. She's pretty much been here since this actually launched. So we thought it was only appropriate to actually give her the opportunity to, in the spirit of Batman, come Robining with us because it is most delightful. Lindsay from Studio Lindsay. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It is great to have you.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm excited to be on the show today.
All righty. So before we get started on our character profiles of the one and only Dark Knight himself, Batman, celebrating his 85th anniversary this year. Unbelievable. It's so awesome that we actually get Batman and Superman back to back. This is always fun. So before we get started on the conversation, everybody, feel free to give us a like and a comment because we'd love to talk to you. And we really hope you enjoy the video. And this is just the start of big stuff, guys. There's plenty of videos on the way. This is not a promise anymore. This is the real thing. It is happening. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you're up to date with all of our latest content. So Batman has turned 85 in the world of popular culture and the lexicon that is entertainment. And it is so amazing to see a character like this be as popular as he has been for so many years. But the most interesting thing about Batman, as far as I'm concerned, is he is the most popular, if not the most popular superhero. There's a very good chance that at this point in time, he's neck and neck with Spider-Man. That is something that I personally feel. But I just want to ask everybody individually, and I want to start with Andy because Andy is the one that was read bedtime stories of Batman by his dad. Andy, why do you think it is that Batman has been this cultural phenomenon and this popular for all these years, especially because he's classified as a superhero, but he doesn't have powers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, right? And I mean, I'm coming from a place of Batman's my favorite superhero, and I love a ton of Batman's stories, and I love a ton of different writers' takes on the character, actors' takes on the character. It might be kind of a cop-out to say this, but I do think that part of the reason the character endures is partially what I just alluded to, which is I think it's a character that's very easy to bring a little of yourself to when writing the stories. And I think Batman is very hard to get stale. He's got a wonderful rogues gallery, which I'm sure we'll talk about this year, if not in detail tonight. And I think all of these things come together for this kind of secret sauce of there's something in a writer that lets them find an outlet in the Batman character that constantly draws new blood to the character while remaining fresh. So that's my best shot at a really big question. And I'm sure if people knew exactly what it was and could replicate it, they'd make a lot of money. But yeah, here we are.
Cammie, how about yourself?
Andy really summed it up very well, but I think that the one thing about Batman is that he's relatable. If you are a superhero, you possess a superpower, Batman does not. Therefore, he's just a regular guy, which in a sense kind of empowers the watcher, the reader, whatever form of media that you are ingesting Batman. He is attainable. He is this guy who unfortunately under tragic circumstances came about to be a superhero, but in a way it kind of speaks to the vigilante in us all. It's like, wow, this is cool. Just this average guy becomes this Dark Knight who has a quest because of his own personal tragedy, wants to save the world. And that's pretty darn cool.
Yeah. So Lindsay, much like Cammy, is not as deep into comics as a lot of other people around in the comic book community, but she still has received a lot of knowledge of Batman through all the other means that we have been exposed to Batman. So, Lindsay, as sort of an outsider from the deep comic lore, what do you think is the best way to sum it all up?
Yeah, I think like what Cami said about, I think it's because one of the reasons why he's so popular is because he doesn't have superpowers. It makes him very relatable. For all of the kids watching the Batman cartoon, like I watched a little bit of Batman the animated series. It teaches you that you too can be a superhero, and I think there's a lot of really universal themes for Batman as a character, like knowing your limitations and knowing how far you can push them or knowing when to stop. Themes like grief, trust, identity, I think are really relatable and universal.
Yeah. I mean, I also have noticed something very interesting that I think what makes Batman the famous, iconic piece of popular culture that he is, because you know, Batman is a name that I have known ever since I was little. I mean, my first encounters with Batman were, of course, outside the comics. I didn't start reading comic books until I was 9 years old. And the first Batman comic that I ever purchased was Batman 500, the last chapter of Nightfall. And the craziest part about that issue is Bruce Wayne wasn't Batman at the time because his back was broken. And the Batman was Azrael in this crazy techno suit, which was crazy. And my God, that he kicked Bane's butt. But I'm rambling here. I was introduced to Batman through the Hanna-Barbera Super Friends shows. I think it was just because of all the crazy gadgets that he had, the all those crazy vehicles that he had, from his copter to his jet to his Batmobile. The fact that he actually, unlike Superman and all the other superheroes, particularly when you're thinking about the Hanna-Barbera show, he was the one with a sidekick. He had Robin. But I also have noticed something very interesting about Batman, thinking about preparing for the show. Have you all noticed that through all of these 85 years, Batman himself, the persona, he is the one thing in his world that is constant. He never changes. Everything else around him is what changes. The situation, the different version of Robin that he has, or a different sidekick at all, the person that he possibly falls in love with. He seems to always have an ever-changing world, but he always is the same old person that he is, the same Batman, the same Bruce Wayne, has his eye on his mission. He knows what he has to do, and he never breaks away from that, even though there have been so many people over the years who have written him that have tried to deconstruct him. They still never stray away from those key elements that keep Batman who he is.
Yeah, I'm just kind of processing what you said, and I think that is true to be had in terms of his constant demeanor. But I think that's also something that directors and writers purposefully do, because I don't think they really want to deviate from what they've created. They need this dark ambiance. They need someone who is broody and brooding all the time, and just has this inner monologue that's constantly his own personal drive. So for the world around him to change makes sense, but for him to be a constant and a consistent, I think also speaks to his legacy, because it is something that we as the fan can relate to, because we know it's a constant guarantee that we're going to be able to go back to.
It's interesting that you frame it that way, Steve. And I think I agree. And I think I agree with everything Cami said too. Without giving spoilers to some of the best Batman stories ever told, one thing I will say is that Batman is unique for me in that I don't really think I get sick of a retelling of an origin story for Batman. Because while we're talking about how there's a consistency to the character, I think that comes across the most in kind of a foundation of loss, and a kind of working through trauma in the way that he quote unquote superheroes, right? So you can actually do a lot with the character to change who he is while exploring those themes. It can be a different person. As some of the stories that are percolating in my mind, the exact nature of what his loss is could have shades of truth and lies to it. There's a lot of different ways for Batman to get to where he or she in some stories is. Um, and I think that that's kind of interesting to point out, because while I agree with you completely, I think it's a similarity and consistency of, if not tone, theme, and not so much character, which is a strength of the character, as contradictory as it sounds.
I mean, think about it this way. Let's take a look at another character in the world of DC that is not necessarily the exact same thing, but not actually different. Look at Green Arrow, Oliver Queen. Just almost, not necessarily the exact same kind of story and origin, but not necessarily entirely different. Wealthy man knows that there's issues going on, had a event in his past that triggered him to save his city of Star City, and then eventually go on to larger adventures, encountering other heroes, joining the Justice League. But when you take a look at his comics and his legacy, because he may not be as well known as Batman, but when you talk to a comic book reader and you mention Green Arrow, especially if they're a DC fan, oh man, they'll tell you stories about why they love his character so much and his lore. But he does go through changes, unlike Batman does.
I think you're exactly right. It's interesting to me, and obviously, again, there's a lot of great Green Arrow stories, and there's a lot of great ways of writing the character. I'm left wondering, if I'm left wondering how important the inherent darkness of the Batman character is. It almost feels like it goes without saying, but obviously, this is to use an overused adjective, like he tends towards more quote unquote gritty stories. Not that Green Arrow doesn't, but I think there's a sort of like gothic darkness, like capital G, to the nature of the Batman character, that I think adds another capital R romanticism to the character that is kind of lacking. Not that it's a lack, but is just not an element of the Green Arrow character. And I think there's something fundamental to a lot of the ways that humans are fascinated by stories that draws us to a character like that and a story like that.
I agree. Absolutely. And I think another reason why Batman is so popular from a comic book reader's perspective is just because of, especially when you start off, you take a look at all of the big names that are attached to this character, all the great writers, including obviously the creators Bob Kane and Bill Finger from 1938, 1939. And then you go through the Silver Age of comics. You take a look at the people like Steve Englehart, who have given us some of the most well-known things that we know about Batman outside of Batman himself, like the legendary Joker fish. That's like a big staple in Batman history. And then, of course, you get to the 80s and you get to the Frank Millers of the world. And then you go on to the Doug Moenics in the 90s, who wrote Nightfall, and Chuck Dixon. And then you go all the way to where we are now, and you see so many different people who, like, they're given a Batman title, they get very excited. I mean, right now, when you take a look at, and everybody brings something new to the table. Right now, in the world of comics, particularly, I'm not going to go into the mini series that Batman has right now, because he's got a couple of mini series as well as ongoings, but there are 4 ongoing Batman comics right now. And We've got the original Batman, which is currently being written by Chip Zdarsky. And some people like it, some people hate it, but Chip Zdarsky for me can be hit or miss. Then you've got Ram V, who is currently writing Detective Comics, and I am very invested in that right now. I am loving what he's doing because he's bringing the true gothic elements back to Batman's world. It looks like something out of a Tim Burton film. It's gorgeous to look at. It's amazing to read, especially with some of the artists. They've had everybody from Dexter Soy to Ivan Reis, Jason Sean Alexander, so many great names in the comic book world as artists. Then you've got the newest Batman, you've got the newest Robin and Batman, which is, or is it Batman and Robin? I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's written by Josh Williamson right now. And Josh Williamson is having a great time. He had such success with the Robin solo series. And of course, my personal favorite is Batman Superman World's Finest, written by Mark Waid. That is just such a fun ride. But I love it because you take a look at all of these books back to back to back, and it's something different every single time you flip the pages. That's, I think, what makes Batman so special, because everybody loves this character. Everybody wants to write this character. I mean, The Long Halloween is extremely different from a book like A Death in the Family. And then you have some of these outlandish Batman stories like Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison. There's so many different interpretations, and you even get some of the most bizarre and weird Batman stories, and people will still read them because they're Batman, like Garth Ennis's Batman Reptilian, which was one of the most bizarre things I ever read in my life. But the funny thing is, Batman's still a constant in that book. That's what's crazy about it, even though he encounters some of the weirdest things in that book. But that's the point that I'm trying to make here, is that he's so fresh with every person or team that tackles him. So there's always something for everybody to enjoy, no matter who you are, no matter what you're reading.
And I'm so looking forward to next month. We're going to get issue number 1 of the Batman, The First Night by Dan Jurgens. And
Yes.
I am looking forward to this artwork like none other. We're going to go back. We're going to look at the early history of Batman. So we're going to get that gritty, that kind of the mafia feel to this. And I am here for it. I am so excited. And Ramon Perez is doing a variant cover, a 1 in 25 on the very first issue from Rad Studios. I'm so stoked for that. It's a beautiful like yellow and black cover. If you haven't seen it, check it out on his Instagram. It's gorgeous.
And Lindsay really dived head first. She went out and got herself a bunch of Batman books, and she's already read 2 of the most iconic Batman stories ever by Frank Miller. She read Batman Year One and The Dark Knight Returns. So what were your impressions of those? And obviously, we'll do individual videos on these 2 stories because they're that important later on this year. So Lindsay, if you want in on those videos, you are welcome to join us.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed reading both of those, especially back to back. I started with Batman Year One, the beginning of Batman's career from Frank Miller's stories, and then went right into Batman The Dark Knight Returns, where Batman comes out of retirement. And so that was really interesting, reading those 2 back to back, the beginning and the end of Batman's story there. And actually going back to the point that you all were making about how Batman is a constant, despite all of the changes happening around him. Something that I read at the beginning of Batman Year One, they put a note in saying that in the 80s, in DC, they were kind of revamping a lot of their superheroes. And when they looked at Batman, they didn't want to change anything about him. They wanted to keep his origin story and his motivations the same because they found it still relatable. And so I thought that was a really interesting thing.
Yeah, and I mean, even when the New 52 happened in DC history, Batman was one of the only books where they really did not want to reinvent the characters. Scott Snyder did not want to touch the character that he was, but my God, did he bring us some really great. It's really funny. And Andy and I talked about the New 52 when we discussed Superman as well. You get the right people to write those books, and there is some redeeming qualities in the New 52, because at the end of the Superman run, we had Dan Jurgens and Peter Tomasi, and we got Superman, Lois and Clark, and The Last Days of Superman, which are great stories. But right off the bat, when the New 52 comes out, you got Scott Snyder writing Batman, and he gives us The Court of Owls. He gives us Death of the Family with one of the scariest versions of Joker I ever saw in my life. And then he closed it out with Endgame. Those are some amazing, amazing stories. And there's a lot of people that say when it comes to Batman's Rogues Gallery that sometimes some people think it's a little too Joker heavy, but you just gotta write the Joker well too. And in The Dark Knight Returns, that's a perfect example of the Joker being written well. I mean, I still remember when I watched the animated film of The Dark Knight Returns, and it pretty much is reading the book page for page. Getting Michael Emerson from Lost to voice the Joker was a stroke of genius because I know everybody loves Mark Hamill. So do I. I mean, he's the iconic voice of the Joker. But my God, Michael Emerson gave me nightmares when he voiced the Joker. And, even when it comes to Batman, even if you put him in a story like Batman Gotham by Gaslight, or you put him into Batman, The Doom That Came to Gotham, all those different interpretations. I mean, if you want to, what I think is the most unique version of Batman is DC Bombshell's version of Batman. I absolutely love his design. He looks like a detective from the 50s, but he got the flowing blue trench coat and a grappling hook. And I just you can draw him in different ways, you can write him in different ways, but you're never going to be able to get those true elements away because like they said, Lindsay said it, they just don't want to change it because you can't. You just can't.
And I disagree with others about that Batman's too Joker heavy. I think that Batman exists because Joker exists and vice versa. I think that Joker tends to live on more so in more of his stories than any other character because there is just such a dynamic chemistry between those two characters and they exist for each other, and it's almost like they will inevitably be their own demise, but there's such a beauty in history. And I think for me, the appreciation of Joker came with the three Jokers when I really dove deep into the Joker's backstory and kind of got a feel for just how sad he really is. And there's just no level of dark like there is inside the Joker. And I think that once you become more acquainted with the Joker's backstory, you have an appreciation every time he surfaces in a Batman story because, again, Bruce Wayne is the quintessential darkness. He is living with a darkness. And so to know that these two men are so consumed by their own depression and their own fates, but yet one chooses good and one chooses darkness, it's just a pairing that cannot be explained. It's just so amazing to watch these stories unfold, and you just never know where they're going, and wherever they head, it's magic. I have a special place in my heart for both of those characters, and maybe that's the horror queen in me, but I just think that the Joker is the best villain for Batman.
So then I highly recommend you picking up the next 3 issues of the Batman title because they're doing Joker Year 1, just in case you didn't know.
Beautiful. I love it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And then this upcoming week also, you were talking about Odd Batman. We're going to get a kind of a messy Suicide Squad. We're getting Rocksteady's version. Yeah, you heard me correctly. Rocksteady from the TMNT franchise, his version of the Suicide Squad, and it's supposed to kick off in Arkham Asylum. So who knows what kind of chaos that's going to bring, but I'm really looking forward to that. So I'll be picking that up next week.
Yeah, I'm not a big video game person, but yeah, Batman in video games is another big thing that people absolutely love. I know that Andy's a big gamer, so he has played his share of Batman video games.
Yeah, and actually, a couple of them have been floating through my head while having this discussion. In particular, Telltale's Batman series, both the first season and the second season. I think I've said it on this channel before, but the longer I go since having first experienced those stories, the crazier it is to me that I still feel this way. But I think my favorite Joker that's ever been written is the Joker from the Telltale games, specifically one branch of writing the Joker without talking too much about that because I really think that's something people need to experience. But to go back to kind of the heart of where it started with Batman's Rogues Gallery, as someone who introed coming into this by saying one of the strengths of the Batman stories is his incredible Rogues Gallery, I think the idea of Batman being too Joker centric is ludicrous. I think that there's a lot of wonderful Joker stories, and I think there's more Joker stories than any, you know, with any villain, and that's just an easy numbers thing to point out. But I think that everybody wants to write Batman, and whether you write movies or you write comics or you write novels, whatever it is, everybody wants to take their stab at a Batman story. They do. And it's really hard to resist the allure of having the chance to also write the Joker. For all the reasons Cammie stated about why the Joker is a great character, it's really hard to avoid that push and pull. People try to do it by writing their own Joker and not calling them Joker. That's a trope we see in Batman stories all the time. But putting all of that aside, he's got such a vibrant rogues gallery that, and I don't want to go into it too much in this video because I want to focus on Batman, but I think the beauty of Batman's rogues gallery is that the best of his villains, and there are many of them, reflect different aspects of the Batman character equally as foils, the way that the Joker does, but to different, more specific elements of the character. So while the Joker serves as the broad foil, the kind of yin-yang kind of story, I mean, we can even see, and I've talked about it on this channel because everybody knows how much we all love the Batman animated series. The way Mr. Freeze was written in the Batman animated series, case in point, that beautiful, beautiful kind of foil to a different aspect of Batman's deeper psyche. So I wanted to throw that out there because it's more than just the Joker is wonderful. There's a lot of Joker stories. Sometimes it's Joker heavy. It's that it's hard to resist the allure, but when you do, the villains really are wonderful. And I know we'll talk about them more this year. Also, I think we're going to read Arkham Asylum at some point this year.
Oh yes, yes. We're gonna read Arkham Asylum.
Yeah.
We're gonna read a bunch of Joker centric stories as well. But you know something, don't worry about going into the Rogues Gallery, Andy, because that was where we were actually going to be going with the conversation. We were going to talk about the two greatest strengths that make Batman who he is, besides his origins and besides his atmosphere. It's the heroes that fight alongside him, as well as the Rogues Gallery. And I really want Lindsay to talk about this because Robin is a character that, for me personally, this is why I love, and again, you know, like I don't want to go too deep in this because I really want to make this a part of this discussion, but we all clearly know Batman the Animated Series is one of the greatest, possibly the greatest interpretation of Batman off of the pages of comic books. And the thing that made that show so special was it came out in a time where people didn't take Robin seriously. Everybody thought that Robin was a silly character. Everybody thought that, because you know, you take a look at what we currently had before then. You know, we had what he was featured as in the '66 Batman show, how he was parodied at the time by shows like Tiny Toon Adventures. And then Bruce Timm comes along and says, Robin's going to be in this show. Robin is going to be a very important character. He's going to be a very dramatic character, but he's going to play the role that makes him that special character that he is. And that is, he's the one that prevents Batman from crossing that line. So, Lindsay, besides that, and of course the fact that it makes Batman more relatable because he actually has a child that he works with and he cares for, what is it about Robin that makes Batman so special?
Oh, wow. Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind, especially after reading, I don't remember. I think it was Jeff Lemire who wrote it. That Robin and Batman, which I
Yes,
think
we're
came out
big
last
fans.
year,
We are
is
big fans.
yeah, yeah. So I think one of the big points of that comic book, and then also just Robin in general, especially Dick Grayson, the first Robin, is that he kind of reminds Batman of the light. I think, you know, I think Batman is a very dark character. Robin is kind of a contrast to that. Um, and then yeah, I think that kind of sums up.
Yeah. I mean, I will always say that my favorite episode of Batman the Animated Series is Christmas with the Joker, because it has some of the best Robin
Yes.
moments, and it also really gives Robin that time to shine. But it also was just a great episode with the Joker in general.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's just like,
Mhm.
I'm glad that Batman the Animated Series was there when it was, because oh my goodness, when Batman Forever and Batman Robin came out, oh dear God, forget it. And you know,
Excuse you. You shut your mouth when you're talking to me. Batman Forever will forever be in my heart. Okay, so if we want to go into the movies, let's go into the movies for a second. So, 1989 Batman, people still love it or hate it because it's Tim Burton. It's his imagination. Some people say it's just too whimsical. It's just not Batman. It's not what Batman's supposed to be. Few years later, I love it too. Few years later, we get Batman Returns. It was a little bit more gritty. It was a little darker. We got introduced to a few more characters. But when Batman Forever came out in 1995, I played the silly bejesus out of that soundtrack, let me tell you, until I
so
just
did
could
I.
not anymore. But beyond that, it wasn't about Batman for me in that case. And that was the rarity. For me, Batman Forever was all about the other characters. That was the first time I saw myself really step outside who is Batman, and I started looking at Two-Face. I started looking at Harley Quinn. I started looking at Poison Ivy, and I'm like, ooh, what have I not been paying attention to? So, yeah, I will die on that mountain. Batman Forever is by far the best Batman movie ever created. Val Kilmer was phenomenal. I loved Jim Carrey as the Riddler. So you just be quiet, Steve, because that was our first fight tonight. That's it,
Hell
Wow,
right
yeah.
there.
you're
Yo, I'm
really gonna
loving that.
you're
This is
really gonna
spicy. I
come at
like
me
it.
with that. You really think that Bat Nipples is gonna go up against some of the other Batman movies out
Hell
there?
yeah, brother. I love this.
Nah,
It's okay. I am notorious for going against the grain. I am not one to ever go with popular opinion. I am a pop culture junkie, but there is a lot of things that I love, and I will fight tooth and nail whoever I have to go up against to express why I love what I love. That doesn't mean I'm going to change the world, but by God, I might find a few more fans out of this. So it's fine. I will die on that hill,
so
Steve, and
okay,
I'm good with that.
so we're gonna come back to this, because I am gonna ask everybody what their favorite Batman movie is and what their favorite
Good.
version of Batman is. So of course we've got, so yeah, I mean, I love Robin. I mean, there's so many versions of Robin, and I gotta be honest with you, to a certain degree, I know that there's a lot of people when it comes to all of Batman's Robins. I think Damian, to a certain degree, is at the bottom of the barrel for a lot of people, because pardon my French in the room, I mean, I always say this about Damien. He may be a douche, but he's our douche, and we love him for that. But I love what I just love all that. I love Batgirl. I think Batgirl is an excellent character as well. Again, I go back to Bruce Timm and how he creates him. I'm still learning about all the other characters that are part of the Bat family, like Spoiler and Orphan. I mean, I know that they're there. I even believe that Orphan, who is Stephanie Brown, she played Robin for a short amount of time. I mean, Carrie Kelly in The Dark Knight Returns, great rendition of Robin. I love her in that comic. I love her in that movie. And Jason Todd is another character that I personally enjoy, because he was such a game changer for the world of Batman, because when Dick Grayson parted ways and obviously became Nightwing, who everybody loves as well because it's Dick Grayson, he was a different kind of foil to Batman, because he wasn't so obedient. He was very brash. He hit back. He was willing to take bigger risks. I mean, when you take a look at the way some people interpret Jason Todd, it's like, is he going to cross the line before Batman does in some points in time? And so then Death of the Family comes out, and that is known as Batman's greatest failure. He tried to break the character down and just show Batman in a whole new light. You actually saw him probably shed the first tears that he ever shed since the death of his parents. Who knows? But I actually just recently, a few weeks ago, picked up the issue where Robin dies. I picked up what was known as the faux simile edition. DC opened up the vault and actually published the other ending. So they now officially have out in the world what happened if Jason Todd didn't die.
Interesting.
I will definitely say that what happened to Jason Todd was much better because it really did change the Batman landscape. And you know, all the other characters, you know, like Commissioner Gordon, and I mean, who doesn't love Alfred, for crying out loud? I mean, even we'll even go to Ace the Bat Hound. I mean, that everybody loves all of these characters, but I think another thing that makes Batman so special is, you know, once again, Batman the Animated Series. What did Batman the Animated Series do that nothing has ever done successfully for any other comic book superhero? They actually created characters that were never in the comics and actually got them into the comics. This is the reason why we have Harley Quinn. This is the reason why we have Terry McGinnis, aka Batman Beyond. So it's just amazing that this is why Batman is beloved so much, because of all of these things that people have done. And then you've got the Rogues Gallery. So this is where I wanted to go and talk about the Rogues Gallery, because that's another unique feature about Batman, because almost every single one of Batman's villains, before they lost their minds, were true geniuses at their craft. We had everything from neuroscientists to expert brains in creating puzzles to people who were geneticists, like botanists. We had real geniuses, and some of these villains don't have powers either. So it's just so interesting how Batman will clash with villains that have no powers to villains that actually have powers. So the question that I want to ask to everybody in the room is, who's your favorite?
So I want to jump in to say I think that what you're picking on there, Steve, about the idea of like who these people were before they became who we know them as Batman's villains, to not be too Joker centric. It's very Killing Joke. And I think that what Alan Moore picked up on in the Killing Joke is exactly that. It's crystallized in One Bad Day, right? But I think that is, well, obviously you can talk about that within the story about Joker, about Batman. I think that One Bad Day is a theme to the broader Batman universe and pedigree of the character and how it's written, right? So that applies to the vast majority of his villains. And similar to what I had alluded to before, about the kind of, they all serve as foils, but whereas Joker is foil to the whole, the others are foils to aspects of his personality. We see those One Bad Day. And it's interesting, we turn to this after talking about the people who support him and work with him and are there for him, which is a funny concept when you think about Batman as a loner, but nevertheless we continually have allies on his side. But you see that it's these people around him who keep him from having a different kind of One Bad Day than he already had, right? So I think the heart of the question is who's the best, who's your favorite. I'm just gonna not do that.
Really? You don't want
to? I'm just gonna not. But I'm gonna talk about not the Joker, in that the Joker is probably the best, just kind of by a lot of metrics, and say that I have a lot of love for Mr. Freeze, which is why I mentioned Mr. Freeze before, which is why I talked about a Freeze-centric episode in our previous discussion about best animated series episodes. I think that the animated series version of Mr. Freeze is kind of the most birthed whole example of what I'm saying. And it's done very elegantly. Whereas we run into this problem a lot when talking about comics, where they grew over time and the audience changed over time, the nature of the characters changed. Sometimes our One Bad Days are kind of silly. And sometimes our one bad days are very serious, and sometimes our one bad days are way too serious, or people want to rewrite them to become extra serious. But I think that there's a beauty in capital R romanticism to Mr. Freeze's backstory as presented in the animated series, which mirrors what people love about the Batman character, and you can again see the one bad day through a different kind of lens. So for me, I'm not really answering it. I'm just pointing out a great example of a thing that makes him one of the best in a big cast of amazing choices. Aside from the Joker, there's a lot of beauty in Mr. Freeze.
Yeah. And one of the few things that I would personally harp on in regards to Mr. Freeze is, besides Heart of Ice, which is a great Batman animated series episode, that's another reason why I hate Batman and Robin, the movie, so much, because the original casting of Mr. Freeze was supposed to be Patrick Stewart, and nothing would have made me happier than hearing him in that movie say, "Number one, make it snow."
I forgot he was supposed to have been Mr. Freeze.
Cammy, I don't want to flat out say who I think your favorite villain is, but I've got one in my mind, but I do want to hear it from you directly.
I think I know what you think it is, but it's not. But
That's
it's
why I think
close.
it is. Mhm.
I think you think it's Harley because I'm
No,
so. Oh, you don't?
no, not at all.
Really? Who do you
Mm,
think it is?
I think it's the Mad Hatter.
Oh, we've talked about this a few times. You know, I think that in the back of my mind, yes, he will always be my favorite, but there's so very little of him out there. I can't really absorb myself with him. And so when I think of my favorite, villain for Batman, it doesn't necessarily go to him right away, but he's amazing, don't get me wrong. But no, it's always been and always will be Poison Ivy. I
Oh,
am absolutely enamored with her, so much so the very first Comic Con I went to, I was Poison Ivy, and it was so perfect. In fact, my hair, I dyed my own personal hair to be the shade of red, and I had a guy who does Comic Cons professionally stop me and say, this is the best compliment I could have ever got. He said, "I have never seen someone get Poison's color so perfect. You look exquisite." And I was like, "Oh my God, thank you." I did kind of like my own rendition of Poison. So it was my version of Poison Ivy in the 1940s, and what I thought she would show up as at a Bruce Wayne gala, and like a dance or a ball or something. So I had this beautiful vine dress. I even painted my legs green. Talk about a pain in the butt to get off. Nobody ever told me how to, like, what not to do at a Comic-Con.
wow.
Paint your legs, let me tell. But I couldn't find the right shade of warmers or pantyhose. So I was like, well, screw it, I'm painting my legs. So I did. That's dedication, folks. But
Yes.
no,
Cammy,
Poison
when people
Ivy.
walk into the comic store, you're that person. That's friendly reminder.
And it's funny because that you say it like that, because I was having a conversation with my husband just a few weeks ago, and I had told him I walked into the comic book store and there was a few oddballs in there, and I said, there's some really odd characters that go into the comic book store, and I just dead silent, got quiet, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "You know what? I'm one of those weird people. What do people say about me when I leave? Because I am a nut job, like I think of all the stuff I talk about and just random stuff that comes to my mind. And people probably think, God, will she just stop? She's so weird. But no, it's okay. I'm perfectly content in my weird. I'm fine with it. But I love my Poison Ivy. I love all of the versions of her. I love seeing her through her different eras. I love seeing her as Lillian Rose. I love seeing her as Paula Irvine. I love seeing her as Poison Ice. There's just something so exquisitely beautiful about Poison Ivy, and something so tragically beautiful. And I think there's an underlying theme here, because I tend to use the word tragic with a lot of Batman's villains, but they are at the heart, at the soul, at the core of these characters. There's such tragedy that lies within them and really creates the character that we know and come to love. And I think the balance for me, and I think that also, we reference back to Batman the animated series quite a bit, but I mean, it at the most quintessential time for me as a fan. You know, in 1992, this cartoon came out of nowhere. I didn't even have Batman on my radar. You know, of course, I knew him. I loved him in my own way, but I didn't fall in love with Batman until Batman the Animated Series. And it's because of that cartoon that it allowed me to be introduced to beautiful creatures like, you know, Poison Ivy, and eventually come to know the Joker and Mr. Freeze and the Mad Hatter and all of these amazing characters that have become part of now my adulthood. You know, I've carried these tragic characters with me, and I think in a way it is my foundation and why I became the horror fan that I did, because of how dark Gotham City was at that point, how gritty it was. I was able to just kind of see myself in Gotham City at that time, you know, and then kind of couple that with the other things that I was doing on the outside, you know, Freddy Krueger and all of these other things, and just it became my core, it became my center. And so when I find a character like Poison, and I'm just awestruck with her as a female. I think she is intelligent and she's witty and she's smart, she's charismatic. You know, the beauty of course stands to reason, but that is always the last thing that I comment on when it comes to a character, is their physical appearance, because to me that doesn't make a woman. You know, it's what's here, what is she sharing, what creates, what is her genetic makeup, you know, what is she contributing to the world. That to me makes a woman beautiful, what she is able to contribute to the world through her mind. And you know, I got all of that from Poison Ivy, and I've carried it with me forever, and watching all these different versions and variations of her has just been a magical thing to watch as a female, and I just love her so much.
Now I totally understand why you freaked out with utter delight when I showed you that picture of that Funko Pop comic cover of her. Now it all makes sense.
I
Poison
do have it.
Poison Ivy is very much on my radar now as well, because I am a big fan of the Harley Quinn show. She has Frank on that show. I absolutely love her and Frank.
Yes.
Lindsay, how about you?
My favorite villain is actually Harley Quinn. I haven't seen the Harley Quinn show yet. It's on my list. But she's my favorite because she brings so much comic relief to such a dark and gritty story. And I cheer her on every time she tries to make good decisions. I remember there was one episode in Batman the Animated Series where she gets a fresh start. And she kind of has a very difficult day. She tries to pay for a dress and pays
I
for it
remember that
wrong, and the
one.
alarms go off, and she's just like, yeah, okay, I'm just gonna be, evil again. And then Batman and Robin are both trying to kind of steer her in the right direction and give her another chance, and I found it very heartwarming. But
Have
anyway, I think
you
she's a lot of fun.
have you seen the directed DVD animated movie Batman Harley Quinn?
Not yet. I'll have to watch that one.
That
Probably on
one is
HBO Max,
it,
right?
it most likely is. I'm just gonna tell you, it's not the best in the DC animated movie bunch, but what makes it so special is the fact that this is the return of Bruce Timm to writing and directing one of those animated films, actually getting Kevin Conroy and Lauren Lester, the original voice of Robin, to voice Nightwing, and having the old Batman animated series animation. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get Arlene Sorkin to voice Harley. She hadn't passed away yet. Unfortunately, we've lost her too, which was such a tragedy. But Melissa Rauch from Big Bang Theory voiced her, and she didn't do a bad job. But that movie was just over the top silly, but it was also for people that grew up with Batman the animated series. There were so many great callbacks to that show, and it's just done in the most over the top way, but it's fun. I still will say my favorite line from that movie is when Batman says, "We can't trust you, Harley, because you're going to change your attitude on a dime if the wind changes, or maybe if it's Thursday." I'm just like, that's just like one of the greatest lines of the whole show, of the whole movie. So, and also I wanted to talk a little bit about the Mad Hatter, Cammy, because I thought that was your favorite because you're such an Alice in Wonderland fan. But again, Batman the Animated Series, Roddy McDowell voices the Mad Hatter. What a great choice. What a beautiful, poetic performance that he gives And it's also another reason why I can't stand Batman and Robin from 1997, because if that movie would have just been a little successful, there would have been a fifth Batman in that world, and Robin Williams would have played the Mad Hatter. You know how badly I would have loved to see that?
Yeah. I heard that, and I'm so sad that didn't come to fruition.
It's because of the fact that he was originally offered the Riddler role, but then, of course, Jim Carrey is the new it thing, so he has to play the Riddler. But they said, if there's going to be another Batman, we want you to be the Mad Hatter. And I'm just like, I think he would have been a much better Mad Hatter than he would have been a Riddler, because Robin Williams has his ways of comedy is poetry in motion. And that's what the Mad Hatter is to me. But he's not my favorite villain.
Of darkness too. If you've ever seen Robin Williams, which there's not a lot of it, but there is some out there of in a dark role, he does it in such a way that there's a comedic undertone to it, and it's very poetic. It's
Death Petrucci and Insomnia are
Insomnia creeps me out.
But he was brilliant in that movie. Those performances are what I'm talking about. And I haven't seen 1 Hour Photo, but I know that that's an amazing movie.
I feel like what you're saying, though, and like I need to get this thought in there. I feel like what you're saying, though, is like, as much of a missed opportunity as that is, and as much as I love imagining what that would be like, I feel like the monkey paw wish that happens is we get like an Arkham Asylum Mad Hatter played by Robin Williams, which I never want to see.
So outside of Lindsay, the two people in this room know who my favorite villain is. And if they forgot, I'm going to be very upset.
I know.
My favorite villain is the Riddler, and has always been the Riddler. Ever since I discovered who he was, I was just like, I love this guy. When I first saw Frank Gorshin play him in the Batman series, that was when I just fell in love with him. And that's the reason why, even though I'm not a fan of Batman Forever, I will not deny that I love Jim Carrey's performance, because, oh man, does he borrow from Frank Gorshin in that role. You see Frank Gorshin in that role. But what I love so much about the Riddler is that he is not only such a versatile character, because he can be played as a crazy lunatic in the green jumpsuit, or he can be a very debonair, distinguished madman like he was portrayed in Batman the Animated Series, with the green suit and the purple tie and the green derby, voiced by John Glover. I love the fact that he can play like that. And now in Matt Reeves's The Batman, you see Paul Dano in that role, which is a very different take on the Riddler. Very different, very unique, very impressive. And even in the television show The Batman, when you see that version of the Riddler, like looking like Marilyn Manson, that's even weirder. But so many different ways that he can be portrayed, and that's what makes him so special. But also, I love his motive. His motive is not to kill. He's never trying to do anything of that nature. All Riddler wants to do is outsmart Batman. That is his legacy. That is his life goal. He just wants to prove that he is smarter than Batman and that he can dump Batman. Although, Lindsay would appreciate this. When it comes to the Riddler featured in the 1966 series, it was Robin who solved all the riddles. Because he was the boy, he was not called the Boy Wonder for no reason in that show.
Well, and then all the villains that have been discussed in just recent minutes, I think that's also what made Batman the Long Halloween so special for me, is because it did showcase all of my favorite villains, and it gave me just enough of each one of them and interwove into such a brilliant story. And that was actually one of the first Batman comics that I picked up after joining this journey with you guys, because of listening to you talk about Batman and his legacy. And I'm like, what should I read? And you guys were like, well, try on for size, the classic The Long Halloween. And I just remember not putting it down. I went through all 13 the different series in one sitting. Like, I just could not stop. I was just so enamored, and then I was so excited every time I got to a villain. I'm like, I get the Scarecrow, I get the Joker, I get Poison Ivy, and you don't really get to see the Mad Hatter. So when I got the Mad Hatter, I was screaming. I was like, oh my god, this is perfect. So it really for a moment did take me back to the animated series, because I'm like, this is dark, this is gritty, and it's everything I would want from a comic book. So that really was what paved the way to all the comics I consumed and purchased, because of just what an impression it left on my soul.
Yeah, the same can be said for me personally about Nightfall. I mean, we're not going to talk about that one just because it's so massive and it's just going to take way too long to read. But it's another one of those stories where a lot of Batman's rogues gallery is involved, and it's all about Bane just trying to end Batman. And I think the most hilarious thing is that he tries to test Batman before he encounters him. And one of the things that he does is he waits for the perfect moment to strike. So when Batman is actually suffering from the flu, that's when he blows Arkham Asylum open and lets all the crazies out. So Batman has to put them all back in. But what does he do first? The first test towards Batman, he takes his venom, and out of any villain that he could choose, he injects it into the Riddler. So the Riddler is no longer this scrawny guy. He's now this buff, like something out of WWE. And it's hilarious. Like, out of all the villains, you picked the Riddler to test him, because the Riddler doesn't care about throwing punches. He wants to use his brain. He doesn't want to use his hands. So it's the most unreal idea. When I read that, I was like, you got to be kidding me. It's really, but yeah, and he has a good role to play in The Long Halloween. He has another great story where a lot of Batman's villains are involved. Lindsay, you just read it. You read Hush. A lot of villains involved in that story.
Yeah, that was really interesting to read, especially since there was a mysterious new villain supposedly kind of pulling all the strings and getting all the villains together. Unfortunately, the Mad Hatter wasn't in that one, but there we had the Joker, the Scarecrow, uh, Two-Face, and Harley Quinn, of course, and then I think Poison Ivy was in there too, so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's definitely a great story. And of course, you've got not just Jeff Loeb writing it, but you got the great Jim Lee drawing it. Such beautiful, beautiful artwork. So you picked a really good one to read as well. I really applaud you for that one, Lindsay.
Hush is a classic.
Yeah, I wish the movie would have been better, but that's beside the point. So we're still very much in the thick of this, but we can't talk about the greatness of Batman with really diving deeper into Batman the Animated Series. I mean,
Give me 1 second, Steve. I'm gonna stop you for a sec, guys. I'm gonna have such a better conversation with you if I can take 2 minutes to go to the bathroom. I will be right back.
take a break.
Let's
Take a
move on
break.
to the
That's
next.
perfect, because I need to let my dog out. So yeah, give me a
Okay,
second too.
give me 2 minutes. I'll be right back.
Everybody unload. I hope you're enjoying yourself, Lindsay.
Oh, this is great. Yeah, I'm having a great
Yeah,
time.
I have to apologize for some of the language that I use. I really hope it didn't offend you in any way.
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, because I once used a bad word on another collaborative video, and then I got people reaching out to me who were part of that conversation. They were like asking me, they were like trashing me on like direct message on Twitter. They were just like, "You're such an insensitive guy." I'm like, well, I'm
Oh,
like, I'm sorry.
oh, no, sorry. I think there's a bit of a delay on my internet, so I don't mean to interrupt or anything like that.
You
But
do.
no, there's been no offense at all. So
I
yeah.
appreciate that. Well, I'm just hoping that you're enjoying yourself and that you're just appreciating the format. And I told you these are great conversations that we have.
Yeah, no, it's great to be a part of this. And as somebody who's newer into comics, it's kind of cool to learn more from all of you guys who have read more than I have. So yeah, I have a lot.
I'm just thrilled that you love Robin and Batman. I mean, that's a story when it comes. I think it's probably my favorite story that I've ever read from Batman. And the best part is it's really more of a Robin story. And because
Yes.
it's just because of the fact that I think it was the perfect Batman story to come out at the perfect time, because
Mm.
Batman was sort of like on the skids at that time. James Tynion the Fourth was currently writing, and a lot of people just really didn't care much for where he was going with the story. And he sort of left on a whimper and not a bang. But then Jeff Lemire just starts firing on all cylinders, and he's putting out hit after hit after hit. And then all of a sudden, we find out that he's going to be writing this 3-issue miniseries, Robin and Batman. He's going to be teaming up again with Justin Nguyen. At the same time, he's working on a 3-issue story over at DC Black Label called Swamp Thing Green Hell, which was also a brilliant story. But Robin and Batman is just a stroke of genius. It's a beautiful story, and that second issue, that ending, it tears you apart in the best way
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. I also I don't remember he didn't do the illustrations for it, right? Somebody else did.
Yeah, no. If you see Jeff Lemire's work, if you just Google a comic called Maze Book or a comic called that he's currently writing called Fish Flies, then you'll see his work. Justin
Okay.
Nguyen. Justin Nguyen is the one that
Mhm.
did the art for Robin and Batman, and he is someone that works a lot with Jeff Lemire. It's just like there are
Mm.
these, there aren't that many, but there are these perfect pairings in the world of comic books where the writer and the artist is just like, you don't want them to do any other work with anybody. You just want these two guys, or if it's a guy and a girl, whatever, you just want that group, that duo. You want them to stay together and you never want them to part. And Jeff Lemire and Justin Nguyen are
Mhm.
one of those dynamic duos. You can say the same
Yeah.
thing about Ron Mars and Ron Lim. They're amazing together. They wrote Silver Surfer in the 90s. They're teaming up together to write these little Marvel miniseries, which are just absolutely wonderful. And currently, you've got Mark Waid working with Dan Mora on Batman, Superman, World's Finest, and they're working on Shazam right now. We just found out that they're going to be writing Justice
Mhm.
League together. I'm just like, you want those pairings to stay together. Who else? Like Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, or Jeff Johns and Jason Fabok. Like, just you love those perfect pairings, and we just need more of
Yeah.
those in comics. We really do.
Yeah. I really liked Justin Nguyen's artwork in Robin and Batman. It was like I
Yeah.
don't know if he used watercolors, but it looked like watercolor paintings. It was really
It gave
nice.
off
Exactly.
that feeling. I'm not sure if it actually was, but it definitely did have that feeling.
Yeah, if you
Mhm.
take a look at another title that the two of them worked on together, they wrote it for the last year and a half. They wrote a 13-book issue story called Little Monsters for Image Comics. Beautiful
Oh,
artwork.
okay.
Yeah, Little
I'm
Monsters
gonna
is
I love Little Monsters.
Little Monsters is the book we want to talk about this year on the channel too. It's basically, my interpretation was Rugrats meets vampire movies.
Wow. That sounds fun.
Yeah, it's just because because I think it's just because of the fact that it's about children who are vampires, and there's a set of twins, and the way that they were drawn by Justin Win, it just reminded me of Phil and Lil from Rugrats. I was like,
Oh,
it was
Yeah.
uncanny. But those 13 issues, what a beautiful story.
okay. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
It's really good. I'm a big fan of Little Monsters. I liked it a
yeah.
lot.
If you liked Robin and Batman, I highly recommend you to read some more work from Jeff Lemire. He
Mhm.
just signed an exclusive contract to Image, and everything that he's been putting out since I mean, like, he was writing a lot of great things. I know two of his biggest titles are Sweet Tooth and Gideon Falls. But I think
Mm.
after he wrote and drew Maze Book for Dark Horse Comics, every title that he's been attached to has just been gold. And I mean gold.
Mm.
Whether it's Primordial or Little Monsters, or currently what he's writing, Fish Flies, and writing the Bone Orchard mythos, all of these amazing books. He's just an unbelievable writer. And I love how he brings these horror stories, and yet he gives them so much drama and heart. It's such an interesting combination that he works with. And when he writes and when he even writes some of the big name stories, like He was writing Moon Knight for a little while. He wrote a Thanos
He did.
comic. He wrote
His Thanos comic was great too.
yeah, but Donny Cates unfortunately he didn't unfortunately finish it. Donny Cates closed it.
I know, but his Thanos was
No, both
really good.
both of their stories were fantastic.
Yes.
That whole run is wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we all set to get back to it?
Yeah, sorry, it was raining. I didn't realize it was still raining, so I had
Oh,
to
wow.
like
Wow.
wipe them down and everything. I'm like, no, it's still raining. Okay, we're good.
Oh,
So we are pretty much in the thick of Batman and everything that makes him great, but we can't go through this video and close it out without talking about Batman the Animated Series. Batman the Animated Series is, I think, a pivotal moment in the entirety of Batman's 85 years of existence, because we had seen up until this point Batman outside of the comics done in so many different ways. We had seen everything from the Adam West show to animated shows, whether it was the Super Friends shows by Hanna-Barbera or the Batman and Robin show from Filmation. And then we had him finally hit the big screen after, of course, we have to remember that the Adam West Batman movie did make it to the big screen. And I got to be honest with you, it's one of my personal favorite Batman movies. And then, of course, Tim Burton's movies come in, and then Joel Schumacher takes them, and we all know what happened after that. And we didn't get any Batman back on the big screen until Christopher Nolan gave us one of the most unique interpretations of Batman that anyone had ever seen. But when it comes to true love and appreciation for everything that Batman is, that entire world, you can't get any better than Bruce Timm, Alan Burnett, the late Dwayne McDuffie, Paul Dini, James Tucker, Bruce Luchik. You cannot deny that Batman the Animated Series is, outside of the comics, the truest, boldest, best version of Batman you will ever experience. I promise you.
Hands down, it's my favorite. I still watch it to this day. I rewatch it. I recommend it to people. I'm so enamored and taken aback still to this day. I sometimes feel like I even watch episodes for the first time, and I know that sounds silly. If you've seen something several times, how can you possibly watch it for the first time? But I think as I get older, I have a fond appreciation for things in a different lens. And I think that oftentimes I find myself trying to purposefully watch each episode through a different lens. Let me pick up a different character. Let me pick up a different line. Let me pick up, something else I can walk away from this episode. So next time I have a conversation with someone about it, whether it's a first time viewer or someone who's seen it 100 times like me, we have conversation. There's still dialogue to be had. And I love the show so much so that I actually purchased this book, which I highly recommend if you are a fan of the show. This is called The Man Who Watched Batman Ultimate Edition, and it actually showcases every single episode, and he goes into great detail about every episode. I'm a deep diver. I really like to get into the core of everything, and this just speaks to my heart because he really loves the show. It's written by Ken Johnson, and he went to take that extra time, to really just dive into it with you. And so watching each episode and just kind of getting his notes, sometimes it does help with that lens that I'm talking about, seeing it from someone else's perspective, or perhaps seeing something that maybe I missed before, even though I've seen it, 50 times. So I cannot speak highly enough about the show. I cannot recommend it enough. And if you haven't seen it, my God, what rock are you living under? And how can I help you remove it from your head? Because it is a necessity. Even if you are not an ultimate Batman fan, even if you are not an ultimate superhero fan, it is just cinematically so poetic. And there's just something so amazing about the writing and the animation and the colorists and the visualization that you walk away from that will leave you sometimes breathless. And I think that is something to be said.
I think you're entirely right. I've said a lot about the Batman animated series on a previous video, so I can be very short here. Um, I really do agree with the idea that it is kind of a quintessential version of Batman, to the extent that, of course, people bring their own flavor to it. There are performances involved. It's the product of many, many people coming together. Um, for me, maybe it's like the time in my life I was introduced to it. Maybe it's where I stood with Batman at the time. But regardless of what the secret sauce is that made this the case, for me, Batman animated series is kind of my default Batman image in my mind for him, for the Rogues Gallery. When I think of the character, when I think of Gotham City, I'm thinking of the animated series. I think that Bruce Timm and the people involved got it. And I think it's something very special and very unique in the world of comics, just how perfect that series ended up being. So that's what I have there.
Take a look at every Batman rendition that came out after that. For the love of God, when you saw every movie trailer or every new TV show, all you wanted to hear was that Shirley Walker score, because that's Batman. That's the biggest issue about Bruce Timm and his team. It's because he did what he did, and now we can't shake it for good reason. You cannot think of Batman, no matter how many actors fill that character's shoes. And this is where you have to thank the great Andrea Romano, because she found Kevin Conroy. And it is so sad to say that we live in a world without him now. It is so sad, because I'm sorry, Michael Keaton may have said I'm Batman, but he sure as hell wasn't compared to Kevin Conroy.
Okay, he was Batman in his own right. Okay, there's another fight, so shush. You
There
just
is
shush
no
right now.
fight,
You
because
just
I like
shush.
Michael Keaton in The Flash, okay?
No, you know the thing about Michael Keaton is that is the definitive mark as a child that I first had my real crush on a man that was older than me, and I didn't understand it. I didn't know what it meant, but I just wanted more of it, and I wanted more Michael Keaton. So he is my first man crush, and I am okay with that. So I will fight you
Okay,
on that one too. Damn
there's
it, Steve.
nothing to fight about. You made an argument for no reason at all.
I'm argumentative about my bats, okay?
I just like it.
No, no,
This is
everybody
good
likes it.
content. I just
Everybody likes it. Okay, guys, we haven't given Lindsay a chance. She loves Batman the animation. We need her to say her piece.
Yeah, I guess something I wanted to say is that I really appreciate that the animated series doesn't like pull any punches in terms of the emotional impact of some of the storylines. Like the episode where, or the I think it was a two-part episode where they talked about Robin's origin story, and I still remember the scene where all you see is a broken rope and then you hear the music, and
Yes.
I just yeah, so like the voice talent is top notch, but like we were saying, so is like the animation and the soundtrack just came together. So
Yes. I'm sorry, Lindsay, you cut out at the very end.
oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I was just saying that
Oh,
the voice acting was top notch, but oh, sorry, can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I was just saying how the voice acting in that show is top notch, but then also the animation and the soundtrack is so strong and comes together so well.
Absolutely. Yes. Robin's Reckoning. That's the episode. That is a beautiful two-part episode. And again, that's a very pivotal episode in the series, because that was where you got a story that it was all about Robin. And this was Bruce Timmons' squad basically saying, yeah, we're going to make Robin a very important part of the show, and we're going to make him a very serious part of the show. And that's why they liked the fact that they actually aged him up. Instead of making him a child, they said, let's bring him into his college years. Let's make him someone who has been with Batman for a while. Let's see how he's truly developed. So it's nice to actually see that he was in the stage where he was not a child, but he hadn't become Nightwing yet. And the best part about Robin in that show is the fact that we still see the youthful energy. I'll go towards my favorite episode of the show, which obviously features the Riddler. And it's, if you're so smart, why aren't you rich? And I love the fact that it's all about beating a video game. And that's why Robin is there, because he's the video game player. And it's just really funny to see like generations collide and how we're going to get out of the situation that we're in. But yeah, so many, I mean, and even a lot of the villains that were featured in the show were some villains that we had never seen in any of the other renditions of Batman before. Like, this was the first time that we saw characters like Two-Face finally in an animated version of Batman. We got to see Poison Ivy for the first time. I didn't even know who Poison Ivy was until I saw Batman the animated series. Same could be said about Killer Croc, Clayface, Scarecrow. I didn't know about these characters because these guys weren't in the Adam West show.
Right.
So, and then all the actors behind them, Mark Hamill as the Joker, Richard Mall as Two-Face, Roddy McDowall as the Mad Hatter, Arlene Sorkin as Harley Quinn, just amazing voice after voice. And another reason why I love Batman the Animated Series so much was because Bruce Timm made a very important point in a first season episode called Beware of the Gray Ghost. And his statement was, Adam West is Batman, and he matters, because that was when a lot of people weren't taking Adam West seriously. So Bruce Timm brought him back into the spotlight, and then Seth MacFarlane asked Adam West to join him on the cast of Family Guy, and the rest is history, which is why the last thing that Adam West ever did before he died was voice Batman in an animated movie called Batman versus Two-Face.
Mm-hmm.
And Burt Ward voiced Robin. And the best part about that, besides that being the last great thing that Adam West ever did with that beautiful tribute, he got to voice along William Shatner, who played Two-Face. How can you not, like, you couldn't leave this world on a more perfect note.
I want to speak to kind of what Lindsay was saying too about how she, identified with the visualization, the music, how you can kind of just take that very subtle, like a silent almost film for a moment in this series. How many cartoons can you think back to our day that had 10, 11, 12-year-olds thinking about music and scores and animation and coloring and backgrounds, all of these things, and we didn't even realize that we were going layer by layer and really dissecting this. And again, I think that really speaks volumes to why it's resonated the tell of time, and it sticks so heavily in my core, because as I was doing this, I didn't realize that these layers that I was unfolding were becoming part of my own core, and I was kind of just building this in. I was having an appreciation for classical music and understanding how a score is very important, and understanding how cell animation, how much time it takes to sit at a drawing board and then bring in the right voice actor. I mean, you don't think about things like this, and I sure as hell didn't think about it when I was watching, Gem and the Holograms. But certainly I love cartoon just as much. But when I think back on cartoons that made an impact, this will forever have the number one slot. Nothing else will ever take its place because of how impactful all of those layers that Lindsay had, drawn out for us were. And we didn't realize it then, but it speaks testament to the magic that is this series.
Hey, you know what Batman the Animated Series did for me at the end of the day? It got me to realize just how vast the world of DC was, because what did this create? It gave us Superman the Animated Series. It gave us Batman Beyond. It gave us Justice League. It gave us so many other renditions. And so it's like, because of Bruce Timm, not only am I reading so many other comic books, but now I know villains like Dr. Polaris, Bloodsport, Toyman, Angleman, all of these outlandish names that I've never even heard of in my wildest dreams. And as someone who loves superheroes and loves these DC characters, I didn't realize, I'm going to steal a page out of Cammy's book, I didn't know how deep the rabbit hole goes. And now I do. And I never want to climb out of it.
this is like an adverse wonderland. We have to find a name for this, that we've crawled into and we don't want to leave it, but it does. It's an interesting way to look at it, but I think that when you are able to identify characters now that you learned about in early 1990s, you know, and still talk about them with such fluidity and visibility and detail, they obviously resonated with us. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, thanks to Bruce Timm, I now say to so many people, if you love Batman's Rogues Gallery, read some Flash comics because my God, the Flash has a great series of villains. I love his villains just as much, and I now know that there are more Superman villains out there besides Brainiac and Lex Luthor. So I thank Bruce Timm for that, and also I will also say that thanks to Bruce Timm, we have the greatest Batman film of all time, and that's Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. I don't care what anybody says. That, Cammy, I know you were defending those specific Batman movies, but I'm sorry, I don't think they hold a candle to that one.
Okay, again, Steven, Batman Mask of the Phantasm is not in the same category as Batman 1989 because that is live action, and Mask of the Phantasm that is a standalone, all its own animated movie. Sometimes I don't even know how we're as great of friends as we are because you just smack me in the face with a wet glove sometimes. Why would I even put that in the same category? It is a category all its own. I love that movie. It is phenomenal. It is gorgeous, but I would not put it in the same category as Batman Forever.
Well, then that's
Yes,
what makes us.
Steven.
Well, that's what makes us different people.
That
By
was
the
so
way,
great.
can I say that
That
this
was so
never
great.
ever happened? This is the first. This is another reason that makes Batman so special. This does not happen on these live shows.
Steven, I'm still laughing.
That is my name. I don't understand what's so funny about that.
I don't think he's ever heard me call you Steven. And in my defense, it has been a while, but I used to refer to him only as Steven. And then he's like, hey, we're friends now. You can call me Steve. I was like, oh, okay.
At least you didn't refer to me as sir. That's the most important thing. No, you see, that's the difference between you and me, Cammy. I usually like to put, it's like I say Batman movies, I put them all into the basket.
I can't do that. If it's live action, it's live action. If it's animation, it's animation. And the only reason I do that is because I respect the work that goes into each one of those types of films equally. And so because of that, I think it's very unfair to put an animated show up against a live action show. Now, if you are doing like who wore it best, or a comparison contrast kind of a thing, where we're literally comparing one to the other, understood. But I will never put animation in the same category as my live actions. I keep them separate for very good reasons, and I will always grade them or rank them accordingly in separate categories.
Well, don't worry. I have no intentions of canceling you because of your reasoning. I'm not one of those people. You're welcome.
Thank you, Steven.
Of course. So I guess the best way that we could possibly close this out and put a great bow on this beautiful package is, where do we think Batman stands now? Because we've talked about all of these great Batman projects, but in the last couple of years, Batman and DC in general has been very divisive. I mean, we know that there are, I mean, I hate to throw this out and open up another can of worms here, but, obviously, you got to talk about the Snyderverse. The Snyderverse was a series of films where it was a guy who definitely was a fan that was trying to put his spin on these and really bring the comic book elements of these characters to the big screen. And then, of course, we now have all of these changes going on in the entertainment part of DC, and the comics right now are a mixed bag and very divisive. But, I will just say that right now, you don't have to be loyal to everything that is attached to a character or anything else that you truly love. You just pick the parts of it that you love the most. Like, do I love Batman v Superman Do I love Zack Snyder's Justice League? Yes, I do. Very much for certain reasons. But I will say that a movie like Joker or a movie like The Batman, I will never say that because somebody loves those movies, I will never knock them for it. I personally think that those movies could have been about anybody. I think that The Batman is a gorgeous noir story. I think that that Joker is a great way to bringing the issues of mental health as a message in the film to the movie going public. I think it's a brilliant idea, but you could have put any person into those roles and you just choose to put the Joker in one and Batman in the other. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's just how I feel about those. There are certain Batman titles that I am currently reading. There are certain Batman titles that I am not. There are some Batman shows that I still have yet to watch. Like, I don't think I will ever watch Pennyworth. I don't think so. Not to say that I think it's a bad show, it's just not my cup of tea. Would I be interested in ever watching Beware the Batman or Batman Brave and the Bold? I don't know if I'll even have the energy or the time, but I'm never going to say that those shows are bad. But that's the point I'm trying to make. So where do you guys feel and where do you currently stand with how Batman is being treated and utilized today?
So I'll try to make mine brief because I'm never brief, and you guys know this. I'm always long-winded, but here's my take, and I will try to be brief. I loved Zack Snyder's version of Batman and everything that he was doing with the Justice League. I will again die on that hill. It was a very unfortunate circumstance that Mr. Snyder had gone through that kind of pulled him out of the project, and unfortunately, we just didn't get what we needed in time. And it just didn't work for the DC franchise. Therefore, now we have this new role that's been taken on by James Gunn and Peter Safran, and it's going to take us in a different direction. So we're going to be seeing a new universe created on the Brave and the Bold premise, and it's supposed to take us back to the beginning of Batman, which is why James Gunn was so adamant about removing all that Snyder had created, which that is a internet argument for another day. I don't think that whatever James Gunn and Peter Safran are going to create is going to ruin the legacy that Zack Snyder created. I think that will forever live on in the hearts of those who love what it was and what it did for DC. But I think the problem that DC had, and it had it for a very long time, is that they were up against the Marvel Universe. And what the Marvel Universe was doing was interweaving this magical connection. And DC was just putting out these films that didn't connect to anything. And so you had all these Marvel goers that were going to see DC projects and like, well, how does that make sense? And how did that connect with that? Trying to create something that wasn't there. And that's, I think, why Snyder's was so successful, is because you had this beautiful continuity of characters and a storyline that just made sense. And you could watch it from beginning to end. And it was just not only cinematically beautiful, but in our minds, it was a story that we were seeing unfold. So I think that the idea is that Gunn is going to come in with Saffron and they're going to create this interwoven, we're going to start at the beginning and we're going to kind of take you to wherever, however long you'll stay with us. Will they get the fan base? I don't know. If they don't destroy characters and they don't try to be over saturated with the wrong things, and I think you all can agree, because we've had this discussion before, the forced diversity, the forced things that don't make sense, because we've already seen some changes he's made in other areas. I think if he just creates stories based on the legacy that they are, he will build a fan base. He will fill seats. We will go and see these movies. I never anticipate anything because I'm not in that I'm not in that world. I'm not a movie goer in the sense that I critique things. I am a movie watcher. So I will show up and I will give it a fair shake, and I will give it a shot, and I will try it, and if I love it, I will rave about it. If I don't, I'll let you know about it too. And I'll tell you all the reasons why it didn't work for me. But I am a DC fan at my very core. I love DC. I will die in my DC coffin, because that is what shaped me from a child to now. I love the characters. I can relate to the characters. I can speak to the characters. So why would I not go and support the next leg of this journey? I don't know if I'm going to love it like I've loved things in the past, but then again, I haven't always loved everything DC has produced, and I still rave about it. So, being that Batman is so near and dear to my heart, being that these characters are essentially part of my family, I will support whatever DC puts out and give it a shot. If it works, we're going to be here to talk about it for years to come.
Well said.
I was trying to unmute. I can jump in. So in terms of where Batman's going, I guess I have a weird answer in that I'm acutely aware of the fact that I have not like engaged with new media in a really long time.
Sometimes it's the best thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. So people watch the channel. I'm sure I've mentioned that I had a son who was born in April of 2023, who has just taken up a lot of time. And also kind of went through a lot of family stuff right before that, which has taken up a lot of my time as well. And I realize has made it hard for me to enjoy new things, the kind of stuff that I've been through. So my weird answer here is I don't know, because not that I'm avoiding the question, but I don't feel like I've been very connected to Batman or anything for too long. What this conversation has done for me is make me really, really, really want to go grab even a single digital issue of some recent Batman thing and just read something after we get off the call, because Batman means a ton to me. And it's really weird for me to not have perspective on this conversation, because I think whether you know me or not, or you watching this video the first time you ever heard me talk and never hear me talk again, it probably comes across how much I love this character, and how much he means to me. So I'm going to attempt to remedy that. And that's my answer, non-answer to this question.
Batman, Superman, World's Finest. And
that's the one I'm thinking of, actually. Yeah.
And Ram V's Detective Comics run. I think you would love it.
Yeah.
Tammy, you too, if you haven't been reading it yet. It's about to go into its last story arc. I personally think it's wonderful. Lindsay, you've got the last word, Lindsay.
Go for it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so as a someone who's a little bit newer to the Batman comics, I don't know if I have an answer for the future of Batman, but I think where it stands presently, I think that there's something for everybody, no matter what sort of genres you like, what sort of stories you're looking for. I think you can find something that you'll like. So for example, I know Batman has a lot of darker stories, but if you're looking for something more lighthearted, I read this one recently, Wayne Family Adventures, which was a lot of fun. It's slice of life. Everyone's having a food fight here, so it kind of shows you the tone. But it's just kind of a great example that I think with Batman you can find what you're looking for.
Yes, I agree with you, and I recommend to you, Lindsay, because I know seeing you on your channel and knowing what you like. I think I mentioned this to you, but you definitely should check out Mark Waid's World's Finest Teen Titans miniseries. It's wonderful. I absolutely love it.
And I just realized I'm the only one that took it in a movie direction. Maybe that wasn't the question. Cammy obviously wasn't paying attention again.
There are no wrong answers.
That felt very apropos to me. I mean, to the extent
But if we're talking of comics, I still heavily weigh in on the Batman The First Night that's coming out next month.
Yes.
I'm so excited about that. I just the artwork alone from what's been teased, I cannot express. It really takes me back to the Falcone era, and I really think that's where it's gonna start, and then it's gonna just kind of take us into the Batman of today. So I'm hoping it's a hit. I'm hoping it's a success, so that we get what I think is the idea of being a flushed out Batman from the start to the finish kind of thing. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
No, I'm with you, Cammie. I am very excited because I'm a very big fan of Dan Jurgens' writing. I associate Dan Jurgens more so with Superman because that's what I've read of his. So this to me is sort of like, I don't think he's ever actually wrote a Batman issue before. So this is something that's very exciting for me. And I want to try and get people on our team to read what came out last year, Mark Silvestri's Batman and the Joker, the Deadly Duo. It was a Batman project that had been on hold for such a long time. DC finally gave Mark Silvestri the green light. Mark Silvestri was mostly known for his beautiful artwork going all the way back to X-Men in the 1980s. And then, of course, him going off to Image Comics and doing things like Cyberforce and Witchblade and all that stuff. But we never truly saw what he could do as a writer. And it reminds me, when I started reading Batman the Joker, the Deadly Duo, it reminded me of Scotty Young's Twig, because we all in this room have read Twig. Even Lindsay has read Twig. And Scotty Young, we know for his artwork. I don't know him that much for his writing, but Twig was genius. I am not sure if Cammie is reading I Hate Fairyland, but that's another thing that Scotty Young is writing. So I thought that Batman and the Joker, the Deadly Duo, was great. I thought the artwork is Mark Silvestri's some of his best. And that's what I really wanted. I want to try and bring that specific book to our Batman celebration because it's one of the newest miniseries that was offered for Batman. But again, Batman Superman World's Finest, I recommend it to everybody in this room. And Lindsay mentioned the lightheartedness. World's Finest is about to get very lighthearted because Batman and Superman are going up against the fifth dimension. They're going to have to go up against Mr. Mxyzptlk and Batmite. So I am on board entirely because Mr. Mxyzptlk is my favorite Superman villain. And I just cannot wait to see Batman and Superman and Robin and Batgirl and Supergirl take on the fifth dimension. I think it's going to be so much fun. So I think that's going to wrap it up, everyone. I really want to thank everybody who joined us today, especially our guest, Lindsay. We hope you had a wonderful time, and we hope we will see you back here for some additional Batman 85th anniversary celebration videos. We'd love to have you back.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I had a great time talking about Batman, and I got a lot of good, really good comic book recommendations to check out. I'd love to be part of another show.
And we would
Yay,
love
my weirdness didn't scare her away.
not even our witty banter. No, and I'm excited to hear, and I'm excited to see you talk about some of these books on your channel, Lindsay. So Lindsay, I haven't really done this on our channel before, but I would like you to just close it out by telling people a little bit more about what you do on your channel. And also, you're a little more than just a YouTuber. We would very much like people to know a little bit more about that secret talent of yours that you tell us about.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, so my channel name is Studio Lindsay. It started out as a book review channel, and I still review books on there, but I also have started talking about my writing process as well. And my secret talent is that I also draw comics. So I write slice of life stories about me, my husband, and my cat in the Pacific Northwest. So that the name of that is also called Studio Lindsay. The Instagram handle is at Studio Lindsay Comics.
And we also want to thank Lindsay's cat, who is wonderfully named Bruce. I don't know if he's still in the room, but we are very glad that he was able to join us for the conversation as well. So thank you, everybody, for watching, and we hope that you enjoy your Batman this year. Read a lot of good stuff, watch a lot of good stuff, and we will see you in the next one.